Home buyers in Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia. Are you waiting for interest rates to drop? You might be making an expensive mistake. You see, when buyers wait for rates to go down, all that's going to do is attract more buyers to compete with. If you are able to buy today before rates go down, you'll already have the home when rates go down. You can always refinance. See, the thing is, you will actually save money in the long run if you have less competition and you don't wait for rates to drop. We're going to go over waiting and what the cost of waiting will be in this market. We're going to go over the actual hidden costs or costs that people don't consider when rates actually do go down. I'm going to give you a real life scenario that happened in DC suburbs, and I'm going to give you the scenarios of how to purchase in today's market. By the end of this video, you're going to realize that the question isn't where are rates going? The question is going to be, what am I costing myself by waiting for rates to go down? The hidden math of waiting in DC suburbs. Let's start with this scenario that almost every first-time homebuyer overlooks. Even when rates are high, suburb areas like Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, Bethesda, Silver Spring, all these homes continue to appreciate even when rates are high because of its close proximity to the metro, to their job. It's just an easy way of living. In markets where inventory is limited, when buyers have to compete, we see even appreciation of 4 to 5%, 2 to 3% year over year, but the compound effect is what adds up. Okay, let's take a home in Arlington, for example. Let's say you found a home that was $700,000 in Arlington. Well, from 1 year of waiting, let's say that market appreciates by 5%. That means the value of the home went up from $700,000 to $735,000. So if you were waiting for the rate to reduce, you might have just incurred a $35,000 expense. That is actually a likely scenario. We're seeing that in Montgomery County. We're seeing that in Arlington. We're seeing that in Fairfax. A real life example, this happened just last week. I was working with buyers in Bethesda, and they were looking for a single family home. Well, they put in a bid. Unfortunately, they didn't get the offer. But what the conversation was is, you have to put in a competitive offer, because if you like this neighborhood, what will happen is the next home that comes up in that neighborhood, they will use this home as a comparable sale and will help guide where they place their home when they go to market. And so really we're kind of considering here what levels of appreciation, what kind of bidding wars we might go up against. Let's talk about why lower rates can actually make our local homes more expensive. So this part catches every buyer by surprise. Wait, what do you mean? Lower rates? That can cost me more money? Well, it's not automatic, right? Lower rates don't automatically make the home cheaper. You have to realize that when rates fall, right, it makes housing more affordable for more people, which means you have more competition. And in the suburbs of where we are in Montgomery County and DC, then your competition level of other buyers that are also interested in the same homes will increase. So let's take the example of those buyers that were looking for a single family home in Bethesda, Maryland. Let's say that rates today are at 6%. Well, what do you think is going to happen when they go down to 5.5% or 5%? More people will qualify for the same home. So that's going to drive prices up because affordability, more people are able to afford the mortgage. There's going to be more competition and more people will be utilizing escalation clauses and being willing to increase their offer. So don't take my word for it. Let's work up a real life example. So I've got some numbers here for the principal and interest. Let's say that you buy a home for $700,000 with a 6% interest rate. Your monthly obligation of principal and interest will be $4,198 on a 30-year fixed interest rate. Let's take the same scenario, but you wait a year. The property appreciates 5%. Okay, so appreciation of 5%, that home that cost you $700,000 last year now costs $735,000. But you have a lower interest rate. So the first example was a 6% interest rate. Let's say you saved 0.5%. So now you're at 5.5% and you're buying a $735,000 home. Your mortgage principal and interest will be $4,175. So your principal and interest in the first example was $4,198 at 6%. And then we see the market appreciates 5% year over year. The house is now worth $735,000 and your payment is $4,175, not including taxes and insurance. So your savings, $23. Essentially, that's what you're saving. So if you wait and we do see market appreciation, then you'll be having a lower interest rate over the span of the 30 years, but your monthly difference is $23. Of course, if you never refinance and you keep both of those scenarios the same, you will save a good amount of interest over the 30 years. But from a month-to-month perspective, it's a $23 difference. Of course, you could refinance or possibly pay off the mortgage before the end of the 30 years. Let's talk about the psychological cost of hesitation. So hesitation, waiting, seeing a lot of homes sounds like the very responsible thing to do. And in many cases, it is. But is it costing you? By waiting, you can't take advantage of the tax advantages of being a homeowner. Of course, you lose the ability to lock in that home. And all that time that you're waiting, shopping around for a home, you're losing the opportunity for your home to appreciate and the equity that you would be building up during the time that you were a homeowner. One of the things that I see as well in the market is sometimes if buyers wait a long time, they re-enter the market. They see a home that might have cost them $680,000 last year, and it's listed now at $725,000 or $730,000. They remember, they say this home was worth $680,000 last year. The neighborhood has appreciated. What I tend to see psychologically are those buyers are willing to be more aggressive because they waited last year, now they're ready to buy. That too could cost you money. Much like appreciation can compound, hesitation can also compound. So let's run that example for the home that's $700,000 versus the home, if you wait a year, that might be $735,000 for a lower interest rate. Let's calculate the difference when you account for additional equity, based off of appreciation or projected appreciation and the projected savings of having a lower interest rate. At the end of those 5 years, does it make sense to wait? So here's the scenario, and I did the math here. I'm reading off some notes here, but let's say that home A, that's $700,000, it appreciates for the full 5 years. Of course, it has a bit of a higher interest rate versus home B, that was $735,000, so it appreciated 5%. It cost you $35,000 to wait an extra year. It doesn't appreciate in the first year because you waited that year. And then it appreciates 4% for years 2 through 5. So essentially, you've got the house that you bought last year that's going to appreciate for 5 years. You waited a year, so you're only actually getting appreciation for 4 years for that second scenario, assuming a 4% annual appreciation and accounting for the higher interest rate. What actually makes sense? So let's make this projection. That $700,000 home, let's say that it appreciates 4% year over year and it compounds for 5 years. So it starts off at year one at $700,000. At the end of the 5 years, you have a potential gain of $151,000. Now that asset is worth $851,655. Let's run that same example for the home that's $735,000. Since you didn't buy it that first year, you're only going to seek appreciation for years 2 through 5 at the same 4% appreciation. That home is worth $859,850. So you're seeing appreciation gains of $124,850. So in this example, home A would actually appreciate in total $151,655 versus home B waiting a year, $124,850. But I know what you're thinking. You're like, okay, yes, it will appreciate more, but what about that interest that I'm saving? What is the full equation at those end of the 5 years? So remember, that $700,000 home would cost $4,198 a month versus home B that would cost, or scenario B, that would cost $4,175. So for scenario B, you're actually saving $23 a month. The interest paid at the end of those 5 years, if you purchase the more expensive $735,000 home at a lower rate, is $193 $193,100 versus the interest you would pay in scenario one of $203,280. So for sure, you would save money in interest. So what happens when you account for the equity that you would gain over 5 years versus the interest you would pay over 5 years? Well, the interest difference is you would pay $10,180 more if you purchased it that first year when the rates were a little bit higher. But the equity difference is $18,000 more in equity on the $700,000 purchase. So net with all of these projections, so even though that the 6% loan costs about $10,000 more in interest, by purchasing it earlier, you're able to tap into equity and appreciation, and that would be about $18,000 more in appreciation. So the net advantage to buying the $700,000 home sooner over the course of 5 years would put you in a stronger financial position, net $8,000 more by not waiting. Of course, we don't have a magic 8 ball. We have no idea what it's going to look like at the end of the 5 years, but these projections do help. Let's talk about strategic buying versus emotional timing. The point is not to buy recklessly. Of course, we want to buy smart. Strategic buyers, they consider appreciation, competition, a proximity to local amenities like the metro or downtown or commute to work or things that are important to them like playgrounds and shopping. The strategic buyers also consider down payment options and the possibility of refinancing later. Emotional buyers, they wait for that rate drop. They wait when there's competition. They miss the market window and they end up competing with multiple buyers for the same property. You can't time the market perfectly. It's impossible. If it could be done, please, please, please call me and tell me how we can market the property. But you cannot time the market. And so don't hesitate. It can cost you money. So if you're in the market and any of these 5 things that we talked about today makes any sense to you, or if you would like to explore it a little bit more, please don't hesitate to reach out. This market is continuing to evolve. It's moving quickly. And if you're interested in purchasing in Montgomery County, in Washington, D.C., and Northern Virginia, hopefully you found today's conversation to be helpful. If you want a personalized look at your numbers and to discuss your search, where you're looking, and what those markets look like today in terms of competition, in terms of inventory, we can even talk about where rates are. Let's book a strategic call. So remember, the best plan is not to buy fast, but it's to have a plan and to buy strategically in your market.